Over to you, Chuck.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, how to move to Power10 or Power9 the right way. My name is Chuck Lisinski. I am let's go to the next slide, please, Tom. Director of Technical Solutions here at Help Systems for the Robot product line. And I'm joined today by my friends over here, Tom Huntington and Randy Watson, longtime Help Systems employees and IBM I champion, Tom Huntington.
Thank you, Chuck. Great to be here. And I guess I'm moving the slide deck today. So if things are paused and don't move ahead, I apologize ahead of time. And, the interesting thing is, with Power10, we'll talk about where we're at with that in the market. And, but then also still talk about Power9 because we realize that some of you may be at that point in time where Power9 is the option for you. So excited to be here. Over to our esteemed colleague, Randy Watson.
Yeah, well, glad to be here with Tom and Chuck this morning. And I think, Tom, you made a good idea. Even though we're talking about upgrading to Power10, or 9, right? Because 9 may be good enough, and they still sell 9s, and they're still a great machine. So, and basically the methodology is the same. But I'm glad to be here this morning, and hope we have some good questions.
Awesome. Well, let's start out with a polling question. Over to you, Mr. Chuck, to give us our first polling question.
All right, the polling question is, which IBM Power servers do you have now? Select all that apply, Power 7, Power 8, Power 9. Maybe your partitions are hosted, maybe you have a combination of on-prem and hosted partitions, and that's actually getting more and more common, more of a hybrid environment. Randy, I know that you run into that and you help people size those environments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fact, as these machines get bigger, and I'm going to say 90% of most machines these days have more than one LPAR on them, at least,
Yeah, absolutely. Virtualization is it's here. All right, let's share the results. This is interesting. Okay, we've got 44% with Power 7, 56. Of course, this is a multiple choice, so the numbers might not add up to exactly 100. But looks like we've got 2/3 with Power 9, 11% hosted, and 11%, same number, on-prem and hosted. So interesting numbers.
I guess this would be called fuzzy math if you're trying to get
to
100%.
A little bit, combination. Combination, yeah.
Wow, that is interesting. All right, good. Let's move on to our agenda today. We'll first hit the topic of sizing your hardware, migrating your data, monitoring your performance in this space, and things to think about with security, because we know security is on everybody's mind. Let me just kind of recap where we are at, first of all, in the market with Power10, compliments of IBM and others out there. As you know, Power10 was first announced on September 8th, I hope, and IBM's rolling out the E1080 2-node. That's what's shipping here at the end of September, so that is available already. And then scale out the rest of the Power 10 technology will be sometime in 2022. You can kind of ignore my date there because I'm not sure that's firm out there. This is an earlier slide from this summer. But some other things to think about is they've also announced the 4 nodes, and those 4 nodes will be GA in the December timeframe. I guess you can get the real big scale up technology here first of all, and then if we look at why or what IBM's addressing in this release, security. We hear them talking about transparent memory encryption, and Randy and I have talked about this a few times. I think definitely there is the opportunity for even security issues within memory, but if you think about part of what is being addressed with the E1080 is the ability to run SAP HANA, which is an in-memory database, and I think that it really makes sense for that environment. But there's also always a risk. And then they're also addressing AI, and you won't see GPU processors on this server. They have optimized the existing Power10 processor to take on the AI technology. And then In Chuck's question here in the polling, he talked about cloud, and certainly, IBM is really pushing the concept of cloud and partnering with even more major cloud providers as we look into the future. And then scalability, advertising 50% more capability over Power9, and then not only the scalability of that, but then also the green impact of that, the energy efficiency as they make the server more and more secure. And by the way, the information at the bottom of the slide is from our IBM I Marketplace study, where we share what power servers you've been on over the last 6 years, and we can see 42% of the market is on Power9 right now, and the survey's open. If you have not filled out the survey, please do so. We close it on October 15th. So we do this every year to get a feel for what's happening in the market, and if we don't do it this year, then we don't know where you guys are at with power servers and IBM I operating system and everything else. So we hope that you can fill out the marketplace survey. Look for me on LinkedIn, and you'll see my post, I think just from yesterday, where you can follow the link. It's about a 20-minute survey. So we do appreciate your time on that, but it's used by us and by IBM themselves, and of course many other business partners. Now, one of the other questions we have out on the survey is, what are your plans from an upgrade perspective? And we see that in the market this last year, 2021, we had 6% of the market was just doing hardware only, and but then a combination of both takes us up to 29%, with so 35% of the market doing that, and then another 23% just doing the operating system levels. And speaking of the older hardware out there, we do run into customers through the survey and through talking to customers that are running older technology. I mean, we have to look at some of these end of service dates here, as these different servers from Power 5, Power 6, Power 7 have fallen off of support even by IBM. And in today's world, security is on everybody's mind, and the newer the hardware is, the newer the operating system, the more you have the appropriate level patches and for both the hardware and the software to protect you as an organization from a security perspective. The other thing to think about is it's not just about Power10 yet for many of you, because the scale out technology won't be available until mid 2022, and Power9 is still out there, and certainly a very what do you want to call it, viable technology for you, especially if your application's kind of staying the same and you're looking for the right business deal. I bet you can get a better deal on the Power9 technology. I don't know exactly. Some other changes that are going to happen with Power10 is you're not going to see the Linux specific servers in the future, and the GPU units are going away. As I mentioned earlier, the AI technology, the machine learning, is going to be addressed right in the Power10 processor without the need for GPU processors. Okay. And let's see, what else? As far as we talk about the operating system levels and what's currently supported, it's easy for me as a vendor to say, hey, just upgrade, right? I realize that, for some of you, it's the applications holding you back, and of course, costs sometimes associated with it, or you just don't have time and you don't have staff. But I do, again, have to talk about the importance of security updates and the fact that that is going to potentially impact you, and make you vulnerable to the market. And as we see, 7.1, 7.2 an extended life now, and 7.3 and then 7.4 are the mainstay. We will see a new operating system level too, as we are on IBM I in the near future. This is just, we do hear often from customers, there's no future in IBM I. A consultant said there's no future, whatever it may be. But this is the roadmap. And each one of these operating system levels, we usually see a 10 to 11-year lifetime here with it, and very similar. The hardware itself with the operating system has, that customers are on it often for 5 years and sometimes longer than that. Just depends upon the lease or whether it was a capital investment. But this is showing IBM I Next and IBM I Next Plus One. out, and then the support of this out into the 2030 timeframe. Pretty crazy. Now, we can't forget about our colleague AIX. AIX has a new OS 7.3, has not yet been released, but it is in beta. So if you're an AIX customer and you're interested in getting your hands on 7.3, that should be available in beta. I know we've been notified about that ourselves here at Help Systems. And so if you're looking for access to it, but again, 7.3 being the latest release and addresses, again, additional security items and also larger database capabilities with 7.3 coming out. But these are the hardware levels that are supported for AIX. Chuck, I guess we have another polling question for you. Keeping you busy.
Here we go. All right. So when do you plan to upgrade to Power9 or Power10? Let's look at the time frame for upgrading. I know I've spoken with a number of customers that were waiting for Power10, so 2022 will probably be their timeline. Of course, we have lots of folks out there running on Power8 yet, haven't moved to Power9. They might be waiting for the Power10 server or just going to Power9. We'll see. Okay, so we've got responses coming in.
Yeah, the interesting thing too on this is, the interesting thing on this is that, we do have, I know Randy and I both have a lot of conversations with customers on thinking of moving to the cloud and some of the things to think about there. So if you are looking at that, we're certainly happy to help you out there. Okay, looks like you're done with that polling question.
We are. All right, here are the results, Tom. 44%. After Power10 scale-out models in 2022. That makes sense. So the next 12 months or so, and a certain percentage moving to the cloud as well.
Okay, nobody doing it here. Wow, okay. All right. Let's move on to Randy talking sizing the Power10 the right way.
Yeah, obviously, as we saw there, everybody's sort of waiting for the Power10 for the scale-out server, which makes sense. But as I mentioned earlier, the methodology is basically the same. Obviously, it's scaling and capabilities and so forth, right? So, why do people, do quote a capacity plan, right? So this is something that you need to do, should do, when you move to a new technology. Because obviously the technology's changed, your applications changed, just about everything's changed, CPU and memory and disk and everything, right? So from a performance and a financial point of view, this is a process that everybody should go through at least at some level, right? And so why do they do this, right? Well, because business is good, right? Even during COVID, we had some businesses that are really went crazy during COVID, while others obviously were suffering more. But therefore, you need more quote CPWR perfs, to support your growth, right? And of course, we've seen acquisitions happen, right? There's some consolidation in a lot of several industries, and that's going to cause server consolidation or growth, just because you're doing acquisitions, right? When you do an upgrade to a processor, normally people are going to change what their disk drives are, and that dynamic is going to change everything, whether it's SSDs, NVMe, which is really SSD, just a different protocol, or a mixture, right? And a lot of times you have to look at both the price/performance equation here, right? It's a balance, right? And then, as we mentioned, server consolidation. As these machines get bigger and more powerful, the financial incentive to do this is greater, right? And whether you do that on-prem, because you have like 2 or 3 or 4 partitions or whatever, or when you go to the cloud, you're really most likely going to be on a multi-tenant machine, which is server consolidation, right? So you're going to be running on some partition with several of your closest friends. So that's important in order, from a financial standpoint, to get the most dollar out of your the investment you made in your machines, right? And of course, when we're consolidating, historically we still see a lot of people who have multi several machines. They have an IBM machine that's got, let's say, 4, 5, 6 partitions, and they have an AIX machine that may have 20. They don't mix the two. But again, financially and performance-wise, it certainly makes sense to potentially put all of these on the same frame. Now, on top of that, you have to have there's a DR and a HA frame potentially in the picture here, but basically running all of these operating systems on the same frame certainly makes sense. Again, it's just an opportunity, and again, it makes sense financially, right? And as Tom mentioned, changing or adding or upgrading core applications. I want to emphasize the importance of, like Tom was talking about, upgrading your OS 400. And you want to make sure your applications are the same, right? So if you haven't reached out to your application vendor, make sure that, ask them, did they support 7.3? Did they support 7.4? Because when it comes time to upgrade, as you saw, some of these new machines aren't going to support that operating system. So you're going to be forced to upgrade the operating system. Therefore, you're going to make sure your application is supported at that level. And then particularly, as we will see more and more of these in-memory type databases, SAP, HANA, SAS, VIA, AI, modernization, all of these typically are going to take up more memory. And as Tom mentioned, the Power10 does have this security of in-memory encryption, which is it's a great thing, right? Or you just need to be ready for your peak season. So let's say you are growing, and this peak season question I'll talk about here briefly in a second is, how do you know when your peaks are? A lot of companies I talk to think in terms of their financial peak. When do we make the most money? And that is often not when your CPU is peaking. The best example is retail. Everybody thinks Black Friday is their peak. It hardly ever is. Most retail systems are really peaking out in September and August, trying to get ready to pick, pack, and ship and get the stuff in the stores and ready to sell. So how do we do this, right? Performance Navigator. This is the tool that Help Systems has, and we spend doing capacity planning, and of course the tool is also used for system admin people to do management reporting and problem determination, right? So this product does a lot of stuff, but it is a graphical PC tool that looks at IBMI and AIX and Linux data all in one interface, right? And again, it high level, it looks at capacity planning, problem determination, and management reporting. But we'll kind of focus today on the capacity planning piece of it. Tom, you'll go to the next one. There we go. So when we're talking about management reporting, there's a lot of data, right? As we all know from admin people, right? So when you're taking this level to the C-suite, so to speak, really what they're interested in most cases is, a trend, right? Am I growing or not? And am I getting close to running out of resource? Because really, ultimately they want to know, do I have enough? Do I need money in the budget to upgrade the machine or not, right? And so this should be something that's done on a regular schedule, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, and it's probably at a pretty high level. Meaning, you're either at it's like I call it a stoplight type interface, so one metric like CPU, are you below the guideline? Are you yellow, you're approaching a guideline, or red, you're above a guideline, right? So this is sort of high level, but that's really what they want to know ultimately is, do I need, money in the budget? Give me enough warning, which is trending basically, to make sure I have that money when I need to do it, right? And this product is used, like I said, over 1,000 data centers. So here's a few examples of the what we call management reporting. And this is one of the things that you can see that there's a graph, but we like to put the explanation of the graph, in this case for this report. This, by the way, is all HTML. And you can see the graph, but any graph, sometimes it's hard to read the numbers, right? So that's why we put the numbers now at the bottom, and you can see what the averages are and what the peaks are, and we sort of give you an explanation of what this data means. And then you can see disk ARM utilization, right? There's lots of metrics, but you know, basically we're going to be looking at your CPU and your memory, and you can see on the right side disk. And this has to do with both disk and memory. So in that particular case, you can see that this particular machine spends a lot of its disk performance is spent doing faulting, which again, you know, performance is at a minimum a three-legged stool. If you count network, you could say four, but you know, and that's a balancing act, right? So you need to balance all three of these, which is why we sort of produce these graphs at this level. If you go to the next one, you can sort of see this is happen to be a VIO server. And again, it's important again to manage not only an LPAR, but really what we're trying to do is manage the whole frame. So this is AIX, which could be, you know, AIX itself or VIOS, doesn't matter. The metrics are different. You know, instead of, you know, system and high priority and low priority, you got user and sys, but it's the same concept, right? We're trying to figure out our use in your CPU. And another important thing is when. It's not only, you know, when do I peak? You know, what day do I peak at? But it's also what time do I peak at, because that's important when you're doing capacity planning. One of the things that I do all the time when I get involved in a capacity plan is, you know, because I'm coming in cold, so to speak. In other words, I don't know anything about the environment, but I have the data, right? So this is what we call an enterprise hardware summary. And you can see this is a one-page summary for the quote executive. So there's 2 frames here. There's 6 LPARs with 3 VIO servers. And you can see what the total CPW available is versus, and the ARPR versus what's allocated. So in this case, those 2 machines actually had 48 cores, but they're only using or allocating 3.5 of them, right? So obviously a lot of these machines, and Power10, by the way, who knows, but you know, the Power E1080, you know, there is a you know, 10 core, 12 core, and a 15 core machine, right? Who knows what the scale out's beginning, but obviously there's going to be X number of cores, even in the smallest machine, right? And you may or may not use them, right? But that's just the way they're going to deliver the thing, right? And then we break this stuff down by machine there. So there's the 2 LPARs or the 2 frames. And you see the serial numbers and you see each of the LPARs and how they're configured and so forth. Again, this gives you an idea of how the machine is currently configured, right? Now, let's say in this case, these are both Power 8s, right? And then you want to look at the next one is basically at the high level performance summary I was talking about for management. So you can see there's like 1 row per system. And it's like that stoplight concept, right? It's either green, yellow, or red. And this is like averages and peaks and the highest, and you got the trending here, right? So this is one of the examples of something you can produce on a monthly basis, right? And this is reporting, not capacity planning, but as part of methodology, when you do capacity planning, you know, you really need to look at your trends. And if you don't have the data, it's obviously sort of impossible to do that, right? So it's important that you keep and track historical data so that you understand not only the trend, but where your peaks and your averages and that kind of stuff are. I think what's the next one is maybe we going to do so here's an example of a consolidated. Now I did do this on a 1080. So you can see at the top there, I just consolidated a bunch of, in this case, 10 LPARs. And by the way, it's a mixture of IBMI and a couple of VIO servers. Then there's probably an AIX server in there to boot. And so when you go to the power, whether it's 9 or actually 8, 9, or 10, you can see this is a 40 core machine at the top, and which is the smallest machine for the 1080. But with this workload, what we're trying to figure out is ultimately how many cores do I need to use, right? And because most of the cost is really not the hardware necessarily, it's mostly the software. So we want to be able to figure out how many cores I need to run any given software, right? And one of the mechanisms to control that software dollars is what's called a virtual shared pool. And you can see at the top there, this is virtual shared pool ID number 1, and it has 3 cores in it. So if I ran all of those partitions in this pool of 3 out of the 40, this is what it would look like. So this is one of the what if things we can do to help you not only understand this. Now, the second part of that is, how do I configure it, right? And we're talking about Power VM configuration here. And so at the very minimum, you're talking about desired settings in virtual processors. So today, let's say you're on a Power 8 and you have 2 cores. Well, obviously on a Power 9 or Power 10, you don't need 2. So the question is how many do you need, right? And the fact that you have 2 today, you just don't need to say, well, what's the equivalent of Power 10? Because what if you're not using the 2, right? What if you're only using one of the 2, even though you're configured for 2, right? So again, this data here, where you say the 0.09, 35, 0.32, this is the quote recommended desired setting to give each LPAR a certain level of performance. And that's controllable, right? So now, as you can see, this gets pretty complicated. And so we do a lot of this as a service. And if you want to engage help systems, this is the link that you can engage us to take a look at your machine and or your business partner, either one, or IBM. As Tom mentioned, IBM does use this tool as well to help people figure out how they're going to configure, quote, a Power 9 or, next year, the scale out Power 10.
Yeah, so IBM TechLine is a partner of help systems under this product line.
Correct.
Yeah. So Randy, I know you're going to share a few things live here. Can you take presenter while you're doing that? Just remind people that you can ask questions. We've got a few questions out there already. We will take your questions and answer them live at the end of today's event. So keep those coming in. And Randy, I'm seeing your screen here.
All right, perfect.
Like, you got a lot of other icons and stuff in the background, so you have room to make it a little bigger if you want.
Okay, let's do that. Let's make this thing a little bigger here. I'm going to drag this over here. I try to keep my desktop clean, but sometimes it doesn't work.
You and me both.
Yeah.
Just like having that closet and garage at home.
That's right. So here's an example of, a machine, right? And it's just called prod. Now, just for reference, this is one of the things. This happens to be an MME. This happens to be an 80 core machine. It happens to have 45 processors in this machine. So one of the first, I'm gonna call it mistakes people make when they're thinking about capacity planning is they think about CPU utilization. Well, CPU utilization is obviously a relationship of something to something, right? Well, that something could change, right? So you can see here's the CPU utilization. And if this is a trend line you're looking at here, this red line here, and it's pretty flat, right? You can say I'm not growing at all, and I'm going back to January 1st, right? So you can see this, but in reality, this may not be the true picture of your workload. And the reason is because what if somebody's changed the configuration, right? So for example, I could go over here and I could say, I want to see how this machine was configured over time. And wow, all of a sudden you can see, well, wait a minute, back here, it had 60 cores. Well, that's interesting. And then it went down in May, it went down to, 50 cores, and then it went back up to 60, and then now it's sitting at 50. And then all of a sudden over here, it went down to 45 cores. So again, I get this data blindly and I'm thinking, well, obviously what they're doing is they're either reducing the workload and therefore saving money on software dollars or something. And these are averages down here to see the trend, but up here you can see this yellow line, this is peaks. So the next question would be, okay, so even though during first shift, so when you're doing trending, you got to think about workload shifts, which is typically there's two of them basically at a very basic level, right? You got your daytime shift when people are usually awake doing stuff, and then you got your nightly batch cycle, which is a workload shift, not a people shift, right? But this is a 24-hour peak, right? So at some point every day, even though this is our first shift average, and this obviously happens at night probably. Well, the next question is okay, I can see my trend. Now, if you grab this trend line here, I'm just going to grab it over here because you can see right there, but I'm going to drag it right to there since they upgraded. Since they downgraded it to the 45 cores, you can see their peak trend is actually up, while their average is actually down. Again, there's all kinds of ways to look at this data, but one thing I was going to show you is, so when you're looking at peaks, particularly because of in a cloud environment or this new dynamic capacity environment, right? Which is in the Power, you can do this on Power 9, the G model, then you will be able to do this on Power 10, which is sort of pay as you go sort of philosophy, right? So now we're gonna figure out, well, when does this happen? So this is an average day. This is a unique sort of a function with Performance Navigator. So I took data from September the 1st to the 27th, and I'm trying to figure out, well, when does that peak happen? Well, it happens at night during the batch cycle, right? So, and again, when you're thinking about consolidating workload, you got to think about when things happen, when did the peaks happen, and also what time zone. So if you have 3 partitions and one of them's in a different time zone, that peak is going to move one way or another when you start to consolidate this. So there's other things to be thinking about when you're doing this stuff, right? So then, part of the methodology is we want to go figure out a peak day. And this is sort of to be conservative. So we can scan all of this data that you have. So you now have lots of data. We scan it, we figure out what day used the most CPU milliseconds. And now I'm just going to show you, I'm going to go into this what if modeling just real quick. And again, a lot of times this is done with a business partner or IBM or with help systems as a service. But this is the interface we're using, right? And it's about how to drive the interface ultimately, right? Now you can see this is the big machine, so you can see down here it's got lots of disk, so it's reading in a bunch of hardware. And what I wanted to show you when you get here is that then what you can do is you can mix any kind of operating system here, right? So you can bring in IBM I and AIX and BIOS and Linux all into the same interface, and they could be from Power 7, Power 8, and Power 9s. It doesn't matter. You could even bring in x86 Linux machines if you wanted to, all into the same interface to sort of figure out what does this combined workload look like on any given model, right? And we're still, you can see this is a big machine, as you saw it, like 80 core machine. And so it's reading its hardware. So there's that sort of same picture you saw before. That's the peak day. It happened to be July 30th. And this is that. So basically you come over here and say, I want to see what this looks like on a Power 10. So if I come over here to the LPAR tab and say set to current performance, I'm basically saying set the machine as is, right? It's 45 and 45, and you can see that peak's 90%, right? So let's just say, for example, I want to go pick a Power 10, and of course, which one? Now, when you get the scale out machines, you're going to have a bunch of those, right? So I'm going to pick this one, and we don't want the 80 core version, right? Because we don't need the 80 core version. So these are KEKs, right? So I don't want to need one KEK in this case, obviously, potentially. Now this is a 45 core, but my bet is obviously it's going to run the same performance on a Power 10. If you click the same performance, basically I'm saying, well, how many cores do I need on a Power 10 to get the exact same performance? And the answer is 21.08. Now, obviously, you're going to round that to 22 or maybe downgrade it to 21 because that's how software is licensed and all that kind of stuff. But this is a quick example of how you would do that just with one. Now, you can imagine on this server consolidation, what if you had 5 or 6 or 7, 8, and they're all mixed mixed operating systems? The picture is going to be the same. We do all the CPW, RPerf, QPI, all that benchmark math And of course, if you needed to create a virtual shared pool, this is where you do this. One other quick thing in the interest of time, I'm sure everybody's heard of, we call it PEP2 in the interface here, but it's really dynamic capacity, which is where you buy a base number of licenses, and when you go over that, you get charged by the minute. One of the challenges with capacity planning is figuring out the break even. How many base licenses do I need over, let's say, 3 years before I need to buy the next license? And the basic, you really, in order to do that, you have to calculate core minutes, because that's the way IBM charges you, is by the minute. So this is where Performance Navigator actually calculates core minutes. And based on this, we basically can tell you, recommend how many base licenses you have. That's the break even. You know, like I need 10 licenses versus 20. And this gets into when things happen, right? When you have multiple LPARs and quote multiple machines. So there's a lot to this. But if you don't have the data, that's sort of my main message here. It's sort of difficult to do any of this stuff, right? You're really guessing at that point, or doing basic CPW math. So Tom, I want to turn it back over, and we can continue.
Thank you, Randy. I think that you know, your point on getting the data is the most important part, is it not? I mean,
That is true. No data, no analysis, right?
Yeah, NMON or performance collection data, either or will do just fine, won't it? And having enough of it. Okay, hopefully you guys are seeing my slides moving ahead again.
Yep, we are.
Yeah, so one of the concepts we talked a bit about was, migrating to the cloud. And so as you saw with Randy, we can help you in analyzing what it would look like if you're going to the cloud, and in comparison to staying on premise or a mixture of that. Those are all things that Performance Navigator can do. The other things you need to think about is, how am I going to get my data to the cloud, right? That is always a hurdle for customers if you're considering that. With the IBMI world, which is where we specialize in this area, is, it all starts with, eventually you got to save that data and you got to get it to the cloud. And there are a couple different options. One, you can try to send tapes or virtual tape libraries, but full save and restore, and which results in maybe a little bit of business outage at that point in time. Or you can do a full save and then send up incremental changes. Often people will, you're not going to just go overnight. So a lot of times what people are looking for is side by side, but really not in this case. It's not really side by side. It's on-prem and in the cloud side by side operation. Another option people will mix in would be logical replication, and using that technology for basically, you set your starting point and then you are sending your changes, or the deltas are being sent every nanosecond that the system's running up to the cloud server to keep it intact, and applying the changes over there. And then the fourth thing people do use is some form of a data box. There's things from IBM, Cisco, and other suppliers, and or some high-speed file transfer technology like File Catalyst and Aspera. Aspera from IBM, File Catalyst actually from Help Systems, and for many of you, maybe first time you're hearing about that technology, but a company we acquired back in January of 2021. So with logical replication, once you get the data set, then you really don't have any outage. And eventually what you do is you do a role swap and switch over to this technology. So what this allows you to do is keep your transactions in sync with the on-premise version of your application, and then provide you with the ability to test up in the cloud. And then when you're ready, you basically are doing a role swap over to it. IBM has a technology called mass data migration that allows you to do basically a full save and movement of that device, which is really, really think of it as a storage unit that allows you to move the data that way. But there is that period of time, it's a point in time backup, and then, you move your data up. So you're going to have some downtime while you're waiting for the data to get to the cloud. Now, with high-speed file transfer technology like File Catalyst or IBM's Aspera. This gives you the ability to do bulk transfers of data, and we're talking about terabytes and terabytes of data in the same business data. And I've run into a couple of different situations now, especially during COVID here. We recently had a customer that wanted to move data to their other data center that was not in the cloud, but located in Canada. They had one data center in the US and one in Canada, and they were doing full saves and then sending those up there. Well, a full save that they executed on a Sunday didn't get to Canada until Thursday because of the travel time, lag time here during COVID. So with a technology like File Catalyst, the idea is that we use this technology to control and use UDP underneath the covers to be able to provide for a very perfect speed transfer and getting terabytes of data up. Really, we can send terabytes in less than an hour kind of thing. So in the case of maybe 4 terabytes, it might take you, 2 hours, 1 hour to send that up to the other destination. But there's some configuration with File Catalyst. It runs from a Linux or Windows server, and then you have to define your network drives over on the IBMI side. But that's something to take a look at, and it's on the Help Systems website. But then, the other thing you could do is you could combine a tool like File Catalyst or the mass data device to set your point-in-time backup, get that up to the cloud, and then from there forward, use data replication technology like the Robot HA product to keep things in sync. Okay. All righty. Well, I think it's over to my colleague, Mr. Chuck, who's been sitting back there to talk a little bit about monitoring.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we're going to shift gears a little bit. The more we talk about the new server technology, we have to think about things like virtualization, because we're seeing more and more virtualized partitions out there. And when we're talking about virtualization, typically we're talking about VIOS, virtual IO server. So that is an AIX micropartition running on your Power server, virtualizing your network resources as well as your disk access. So as you add IBMI partitions, you've also got some AIX partitions to monitor in your environment. A lot of folks just kind of leave those on the wayside and don't spend any time monitoring those. But like your IBMI partitions where your ERP application is running, you need to monitor that VIOS partition as well in order to make sure that your environment is healthy. Along with high availability, we talk about Power HA. You might be moving into that technology, and that includes independent ASP technology. All right, so that is yet another data point that you need to monitor to make sure that your environment is healthy. Dashboards, of course, are terribly popular. We like to have something to look at. Of course, we want to get notified on our mobile device if we do have some kind of an issue, but more and more we still hear about folks that want to have dashboards of some kind, either in their data center or just on their maybe their third monitor that they have sitting on their desk at home, so that they can see the dashboard, and when something turns red or yellow, they can be notified of that. And finally, there's yet another operating system that we need to consider. Tom mentioned Linux at the very beginning of this presentation, and of course, Power Linux running on a Power server is yet another operating system that you may need to monitor. You may have some applications running there. So we have an option for you for monitoring all of this information. It's called Robot Monitor, and it is our real-time live monitoring tool, highly customizable to your workloads running in your environment, be they on IBMI, be they on Linux or AIX. This tool can monitor all those partitions and be customized both in terms of what it monitors and the thresholds that you put in place. So the monitoring could be in terms of maybe more performance related, talking about disk IO and CPU and faulting rates, or it could be more binary. For instance, maybe monitoring job queue status, out queue status, subsystem status. And then notification can be wrapped around any of that monitoring in terms of exception notification. So if you do have some kind of an issue, whether it's poor response time for your interactive users, maybe it's jobs that are running a long time, or potentially, and this is something that we're hearing more and more and more about, it's those JDBC, ODBC connections. Be they maybe consuming resources, maybe they're running a long time, maybe they're increasing in number. All those types of metrics can be monitored within Robot Monitor. So Robot Monitor is a central monitoring hub for all those partitions in your customized environment, and it's all native. All the monitoring is happening native on IBM i, Linux, and AIX, and all the data is stored in the IBM i database. Tom, next. All right, so with the live monitoring comes the drill down capability. So here's the scenario. So you're notified, maybe via robot alert, that your JDBC workload has hit a high in terms of CPU utilization. So it says here we've hit 182%, and as you can see in the graph from Robot Monitor, when that peak happened, and in this case when it ended, but maybe when you got notified, it's still active. All right, so you have the ability basically to double click on the peak to drill down into the exact workload that's causing that JDBC spike. Tom, let's go to the next slide. All right, so it might look something like this. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a list of those jobs that constitute the JDBC workload. Q, ZDA, SO, and NIT, our favorite job around. With a right click, I can simply work with that job, and I get to the work job information, kind of the same kind of thing you might see in the green screen if you could find it quick enough. We also have the ability, though, to both take action, change, hold, release, or end the job, and drill down to the SQL statement. What's causing the workload to spike? And oh, by the way, what's the IP address of that workload? Where's it coming from? Where's the request coming from? Because that's where these JDBC connections really hit the road, is they're pulling data typically maybe into a data warehouse or maybe into another external application. And likewise, Power HA monitoring is integrated into Robot Monitor. So if your, for instance, your cluster resource group comes down, we could tell you about that. So Tom, let's do a live demo of this technology.
Sounds good, Chuck. I'll let you know when your screen is up on my end.
All right.
Again, thank you for hanging out with us today. If you have any more questions, keep those coming in and we will read them off on the end here.
All right, and here it comes.
There you are.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the interface. So this is a Windows application accessing data that's in DB2. The Robot Monitor tool is pulling data from all of the partitions that are associated with your environment. We're looking at a single partition view called Academy currently. All right, my systems and groups view is over here on the left-hand side. So I've got a whole bunch of systems, and you'll see some AIX partitions, you'll see some BIOS partitions here, and of course, a number of IBM i partitions. You'll also see dashboards. And then down below, you'll see thresholds and for instance, data definitions. What are we monitoring? All right, so we've got data showing up on our single partition view. For instance, right now we've got CPU that's increasing, and right down here it says JDBC CPU is at 128%. Huh, well that's interesting. Let's just drill down into that and let's see what's going on. All right. So these are the jobs that are constituting that workload, and you can see that some guy submitted a request. All right, we can see when it was submitted, and we can also see the SQL statement and the IP address as to where it came from, and we have the ability even to drill down into the job log. all from this interface. And likewise, I can take action. All right. So let's go back to the single system view again. Now, this is what my JDBC workload currently is. If I double click on it, it's going to tell me, well, here's where you've been, and here's where you currently are in terms of my JDBC workload. All right, any workload can be monitored like this. Like I said, this is totally customizable, but where have we been over time? All right, so every 30 seconds, we're out there collecting data off your system, and I'll show you some of the other data points that we can collect, but what are your averages? So here's my average CPU utilization for my JDBC connections for the last 12 months. And well, let's maybe just drill into September here, and let's see what that looks like. Now, all this data is presented in graphical form in the Windows interface, but of course, any of this can be reported on. You can do instantaneous output, or you can schedule reports to be created from the graphical interface. So here's my average JDBC CPU utilization for the month of September for every day of the month. All right. Now, I will also show our dashboard technology. So storage is a big part of monitoring, of course. All right. So here's my storage utilization across all 10 of my partitions: IBMI, AIX, Linux, VIOS. All right, and you can present the data in different forms, widgets or different widgets, gauges, textual form, and likewise for the dashboards that you can create, you can turn the dashboard into a slideshow. So you can create as many dashboards as you want and spend as much time in each dashboard view as you want. And Tom, I think that's about all we have time for.
Very good job there, sir. Very good. Keep the questions coming in, and let me take back presenter control, and away we go. All right, well, let's just wrap it up a little bit with some security considerations. I don't want to spend a lot of time on here, but as you're looking at upgrading your system, it's a good time to also be evaluating, your security situation. Are your systems getting closer and closer to the internet? Are you combining different OSs on the same power system? Do you have the same staff that you've had in the past oh, maybe I'm not sharing my screen.
Yep, Tom, share your screen. Yep.
There we go. All right.
Got
You
it.
seeing it now? All right, cool. And then free, one of the things that we do here at Help Systems is free security scan. And then also we do penetration tests of just IBMI if you want, or we can do vulnerability scans and penetration testing of your entire organization here at Help Systems, as we do multi-platform type security solutions in that space too. One of the things I wanted to make you be aware of is multi-factor authentication. We've had that technology in the Help Systems product line PowerTech for now over probably 5 years, and this is now becoming a requirement for cybersecurity insurance. So this helps deliver more than just a password to provide additional security access around the IBMI platform. The other thing, I just was having this discussion yesterday with a customer about all object authority and the danger of that, and that basically anybody with all object authority has the keys to the kingdom and they can do whatever they want. And consequently, this creates a situation where you're really vulnerable within the organization, or unfortunately, some accounts even allow users to have all object authority, and it's just a bad practice. So we find most of the issues with security to be more misconfigurations. There's more breaches because of poorly configured systems, and the problem is that people aren't even auditing their user security on IBMI. A lot of people don't even have Q audit journal turned on, and then just some of the basics things like configuration of password settings and making sure they're enforcing those, and then ultimately one of the top things that we do for people is provide exit point monitoring IBMI, which basically builds a firewall around the IBMI DB2 database. So ransomware is something you don't always think about with IBMI, but reality is it can happen on IBM I too. Again, it goes back to misconfigured systems. Somebody in the Windows world has basically root access to IBM I. They accidentally click on a ransomware and it encrypts every storage unit they can see, including IBM I. So it can happen. Our security scan, our free security scan will actually point out that weakness and tell you about it. And it's something you can fix or at least alleviate by making some configuration changes. We can go a step further with, of course, AV and or antivirus technology. And we do that for IBM I, we do that for AIX, we do it for Linux, the free security scans, but we do the virus protection for those too. So keep in touch on our time here. Another thing to think about as you're upgrading, especially when we get into the second half of 2022, when the new Power 10s are out, or even, I'm sorry, the Power 9s today, we also have the Solution Edition program that Help Systems participates in. And if the server that you're looking to upgrade into fits into the S22 or the S914, there's some opportunity to get some ISV kickback from Help Systems in relationship to some of our products that we offer in the marketplace. And Chuck, off to you for the last polling question. How can Help Systems help you?
Yep, we've got that launch. First of all, we've got the, of course, capacity planning. If you're interested in learning how to monitor your various server technologies, security concerns, maybe you want to focus on AIX or Linux. And then we also have something called a tech update, which is where we have a technology discussion around what you're currently using from Help Systems and maybe how we can partner up more so. And I was going to mention too, Randy, there's a free version of Performance Navigator. Why would somebody want to run the free version of Performance Navigator?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I mentioned, if we don't have any historical data, there's nothing to analyze, right? So unlike a lot of software, the data collection piece, in other words, the data, the host code that collects all this, manages the historical collection of all this data, is free. We don't have any agents, so we're actually using, for IBM I, we're actually analyzing collection services. So we just have code that analyzes that data. For AIX and BIOS, it's either Topaz or Inmon. So that's part of the operating system. So again, we just have code that manages and analyzes that and keeps a historical record. For Linux, it is open source Inmon. So that's where that comes from. And so we encourage everybody to install this just to collect data. Because let's say that you're thinking about, and a lot of you people were mentioning you're looking at next year for the scale out. Wouldn't it be nice to have 6 months of historical data, particularly, we're coming up on this Christmas season. When you upgrade, to have some data to look at to figure out your peak methods and your trends and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I recommend all the customers that I talk to load up Performance Navigator, the free version.
Okay, guys. Hey, we do have a couple of questions out there. Lease versus buy. What's the best thing these days? Any thoughts on that?
Well, this is Randy. They obviously, that is I'm going to call it a corporate methodology.
Yeah.
Financial methodology
versus OpEx and what your organization's looking at.
Yep.
I mean, I'll say on the software side, right, Randy, we see more people interested in subscription-based pricing these days than we do what would we be called the traditional perpetual, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of the idea behind all of this obviously going to the cloud versus on-prem. It's a CapEx versus OpEx sort of financial decision, right? And even this dynamic capacity, this on-prem cloud-like infrastructure, paid by the minute if you go over X number of cores, is it's a CapEx and OpEx, financial numbers, right? So I think you're right, Tom. A lot of more and more companies are looking at doing this from an OpEx standpoint versus a CapEx,
Yeah, I really think that that's the case too, Russ. It's a great question, but each organization, it's really different. I see more people wanting subscription today, and I think that kind of leads itself more to this cloud computing model, and it's kind of the more acceptable way these days. And then Chuck, you answered some questions about how Robot Monitor, what it consumes CPU wise on a system. And I don't know if you want to refute that. And I notice we're right at the top of the hour too. So.
Yeah. You know, it will consume some CPU cycles, but it does so very efficiently, and we're collecting a lot of data depending on what you want to monitor, and it does it very efficiently. Love to talk to you about it.
Okay. All right. Well, that said, thank you, gentlemen, as always. Pleasure working with you. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Hard to believe we're almost midway through October already, October 12th. Oh, my gosh.
Halloween's
All
around
right.
the corner.
There we go. All right. Good
All
luck,
right.
guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good luck, everybody, too, with the Power 10 upgrades.